Hi there, it's me, Stephen Thomas, with another housing debrief. First, wanted to bring you up to speed as to where we are. We were stuck above 7% interest rates for a little bit of time, and what we saw was actually most markets had hit their peak. But they hit their peak and they started coming down. But demand came down faster than the inventory was coming down. Not all markets, most markets have peaked. But in all markets, we saw a big drop in demand. And that big drop in demand with only a small drop in supply meant the market slowed further. But good news is, as of yesterday, I'm recording this on the 8th, Friday. On Thursday, the 7th, we had interest rates come down underneath of 7%, and it went down even further today. So we're definitely in the sixes again. So that's good news. We need to be under 7 for the market to rev up a bit. The further down it goes, when it goes down below 6.5%, it gets even faster. But that's where we're at right now. But let's get into the latest, and that is housing market under Trump. Exactly what is going to happen to the housing market under a Trump administration? That's right. We all went and did our due diligence and voted for the president of the United States of our choice. And ultimately, in the end, Trump defeats Harris and makes a historic comeback. And all the papers. This is the Wall Street Journal talking about this second-term presidency of Trump that he is now embarking on. And everybody's kind of, in my world, everybody's wondering, so what does that mean to the housing market? With a change in the presidential administration and a change in the direction of the way policies are and all that, how is that going to impact the housing market? Because you know what? At the end of the day, it's all about rates. It's what is going to happen to rates, because rates drives the housing market. And immediately everybody thought, we're going to have interest rates at 8%. That's not going to happen. We're not going to have interest rates at 8% because that would slow down the entire United States economy to the point where then it would cause some sort of a recession. There'd be a lot of things that would break. And then what would come of that are lower rates. So 8% is not going to happen. And for a while there, everybody thought we were going to be above 7%, but that is not what's happening either. And what we found is that we are, at the housing market, very, very interest rate sensitive. So the housing market responds to these different interest rates levels. When they're way above, when they're too high in the sevens, it really slows down and makes the overall housing market sluggish. It's not just buyers that don't want to buy, it's homeowners that don't want to sell. So it just gums up everything and gets frozen. But then we learned in September that once we get all the way towards 6%, we started to see a jump in demand. We saw more homes coming on the market. That is where there will be more transactions taking place. So we just got to get back down to the low sixes to get things moving again for the housing market across the United States, so that more buyers can buy and more homeowners can sell and get that proper churn going for the housing market, because it has been absolutely frozen and stuck for over 2 years now. So really it boils down to the White House and how is the White House going to ultimately affect rates? And there are a bunch of administrative policies, and the biggest ones that everybody's talking about is inflation. So what Trump has talked about is wanting to bring inflation down, and also has talked about tariffs. That's a second policy that wanted to apply tariffs, kind of like how he was talking about doing tariffs during his last administration. And then there's this mass deportation that has been talked about. And then another thing is, of course, tax cuts. These are some of the big administrative proposals that were carried out, and that was the kind of like the thread that was going through all the different speeches throughout the last months leading up to this election of this week. So, but we're going to get into each one of these. And the first one is a tax cut. And if we get a tax cut across the United States, it's supposed to help out all middle class and all that good stuff. So at the end of the day, what happens is if you really want to cut everybody's taxes, what that ultimately does is it starts some extra consumer spending, because if more citizens have more money in their pockets because they're not paying as much in taxes, what they do is they consume more. So when you consume more, demand goes up. And when demand goes up, prices go up. And when prices go up, you again have too much pressure on inflation. So that is one of the ultimate ramifications of where we've been with the higher inflation. And you know what? Inflation has been coming down. We'll get to where inflation is right now, but it doesn't allow for all these policies to take place. So there will be some changes coming up, because let's get into tariffs. Now, as far as tariffs are concerned, that leads to taxes on all imports. So if all imports are taxed, as a result, prices again have to go up, because if you are paying more and you're going to go ahead and sell them, you got to sell them at a higher cost to consumers in order to make up for those tariffs that ultimately, since we're charging more to bring the goods in, we're going to have to charge more to United States citizens. So ultimately they pay more, which if everybody's paying more, then again, that is another inflation driver. So what ends up happening with this like trade war, it ends up becoming a trade war, because when we say we're going to do these tariffs, then they say they're going to do this tariff back, and it goes back and forth. If you did tariffs and everything, they would do tariffs and everything, and it would just gum up the system completely. So what ends up ultimately really happening, and what happened during the last time that Trump did these tariffs in his last administration, it's what we in economics land, they refer to it as the tariff tap dance. So there'd be like an item that would have a tariff on imports, and then in exchange, a lot of times, because this was really directed a lot of times at China, they in turn did the same thing. They had a tariff on something that they imported from the United States. So it became this tap dance where it was just to see who would cave first and how far they would go. But it didn't amount to a whole heck of a lot of sweeping tariffs across the board. That's just not going to happen. It's not going to be one of those things where we're going to have these sweeping tariffs. We're going to charge for everything coming in, and as a result, we're going to bring down the deficit. That won't happen, because if we're charging tariffs for everything, it's just going to increase the cost that of those goods coming over, and then in turn, the cost of selling them here in the United States will go up. So that's not what is really going to happen. Then you have the mass deportation that Trump had talked about. And the mass deportation, what ends up happening is a lot of these people that were over here that were non-citizens coming over here illegally, a lot of them are actually building houses and doing a whole, they're in a few different sectors. One of the biggest one is housing. A lot of them are in Texas. But what ends up happening is that if all those jobs were to leave and they were to go back to their countries because they can no longer live here and they can no longer work here, that would create a vacuum, because we do not have enough workers. And we've seen this in the past. If we don't have enough workers and all of a sudden we have a whole bunch of job openings, not enough workers, you then have to pay them more. And if you're paying them more, wages go up. As a result of wages going up, they have to, in turn, charge more for houses or whatever the goods are, and now prices go up further, which again is a driver of inflation. So at the end of the day, what I've just talked about are all those things that he wants to bring down inflation and wants to deport people, and ultimately all these different policies. If you enacted them completely on their face, it would actually cause more inflation, and that is not what everybody wants to do. So at the end of the day, you know what? This is going to be a slow process. That initial tax cut, the first one didn't come for until the end of the initial year. So there was going to be some jockeying of position, and some of these policies will morph over time, and they will definitely evolve and in what they're going to be delivering down the road. Because at the end of the day, there are a lot of really smart economists, macroeconomists, international economists. There are strategists. There's a lot of strategy that is behind all this. They're going to get all these strategists and everybody, all the economists, all the smartest people in the room, and they will all talk about the ramifications of the various policies and what can be threaded, the needle that can be threaded, which direction you might want to go rather than this direction. So ultimately, like I said, this is going to evolve because it's going to involve people that can actually explain things so that it's better understood as to what the various results would be of any policy choice going forward. So, and you know, at the end of the day also, as far as the Trump administration is concerned, he's already going to be inheriting economic headwinds that we've been dealing with for quite some time. But before we get into that, let's bring in our sponsor. Our sponsor is Mike Grabow from JMJ Financial. You can reach Mike at 714-794-7668. That's 714-794-7668. And he's at the Thibodeau Morel Group and just knows his stuff. He is as sharp can be. So contact him. He's got some great programs. He's trying to find ways to purchase homes non-contingent on selling a current residence, and which is going to become increasingly important going forward as the market tightens up when rates drop further. So Mike is able to consult with clients to find the best means possible to write competitive offers. And there's temporary solutions for long-term goals. They could do bridge loans, buy before you sell, cross-collateral loans, non-QM loans. There's different there's different strategies for various clients to get them into a home so that they can compete and don't have to sell their home first in order to do it. So meet with Mike. Mike knows his stuff. Mike Grabow for JMJ Financial at 714-794-7668. That's 714-794-7668. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate your sponsorship once again. So let's get into the inherited economic headwinds that are already there. And one of them is jobs. The job market, because the Federal Reserve has been as restrictive as they are, it has been slowing the job market. We didn't get that a reading in October that was for September. That, of course, didn't happen. And in the last reading that we got on November 1st, you could see it was just a meager 12,000, but that was because of a giant strike as well as the hurricanes. So we're not going to get a true read on where the jobs market is until the first Friday of December, when the next big jobs report comes out, which we'll report on November. And you can see unemployment's at 4.1%. It actually went from 4.2 to 4.1 and remained at 4.1 for a month. Now, you have to look at the trend lines overall. The trend lines are job growth has been waning and unemployment has been increasing from very, very low levels to levels of where we were prior to COVID. So it's more of a normalization, but what the Fed does not want is for this to continue to deteriorate with job growth less and unemployment rising. So this is something that is in what's going on behind the scenes, and what this will lead to are more rate cuts to come. So as this continues to deteriorate, slow a little bit more, you're going to see that the Fed will continue to do their cutting policies. They did a 0.5 point rate cut in September. They did a 1/4 rate point cut yesterday, Thursday, the 7th of November, after the election. And they're poised to do another one in December. And then they'll tell us where the interest rates are going to go from there. But this is very important to remember, that the overall jobs market has been slowing over time because of how restrictive the Fed policy is with how high their rates are. And then this is something very important to understand: the transition to serious delinquency. This is actually done by the New York Federal Reserve, and it's just all the different kind of loans that there are. There's at the bottom right, you'll actually see that's HELOCs, that's equity line of credits, mortgages, and student loans, and they're all very, very low levels, extremely low levels. And for housing, mortgage, and HELOC transition to serious delinquency, it's at decades lows, and it's been hovering around there. Now, red is the credit card serious delinquency, the transition to serious delinquency, and it's at its highest level since the first quarter of 2008. And automobile transition to serious delinquency is the blue line, and it's at its highest level since the second quarter of 2008. Now, why I bring this up is not because we're going into the Great Recession. It's because what this will do is this will curtail spending in the future and will bring some spending down, which is GDP, the biggest section of GDP is consumption. It is a giant piece of GDP. So when we're not consuming, and the United States likes to consume like nobody else's business, when we're not consuming as much, that will slow things down further, and you'll get a further easing of rates as a result. So this is something that we're continuing to watch in the background as well. And so overall, as the economy continues to cool, which it's poised to continue to do, and there will be blips along the way like there were in October, reporting on September, there was last year as well, and the year prior. So, but when the economy slows, what we're going to see is that rates fall. And that's ultimately what is going to continue to happen until Trump takes office in January. And when rates fall, demand will increase. And then as rates fall enough, you're going to see, like we saw when we were at the low 6% range, we saw a lot more demand. And this can line up during the spring market this coming up year in 2025. That's not what happened in 2024. We had above 7% interest rates from April all the way through till we got to about middle of July. And anything with a 7 on it slows down our market tremendously. So that is... we're not rooting for 7% interest rates. We want to free up Americans to be able to sell their homes and buy homes. So we're rooting for that 6% level, and that's probably where we're going to get during the springtime versus this year where we had them in the 7s, and that just slowed things down so much that it really cooled the housing market because it lined up during spring and summer. So as demand increases, we're actually going to see values continue to rise as well. There will be more homes that come on the market, as there were more this year than last year, but it still is not as many as where we were prior to COVID. But as soon as rates fall down enough, more and more homeowners will place their homes on the market. And one more thing I wanted to bring up, and this is not a headwind, but I wanted to talk about inflation, and that is, this is PCE, it's personal consumption expenditures. Everybody follows CPI, which is Consumer Price Index, but this is the Fed's favorite gauge. And if you look at PCE, and this is where I'm pointing to right there, that's core and headline on the right-hand side, you could see we were much higher in the 1980s. That's those two Himalayas, about 2/3 of the way over to the left. And inflation is really coming down. As a matter of fact, if you pull out a lot of the rent stuff and you put in actual rents and what rents have done over the last year, rather than that's the rent indices that they use to put these things together, it really does show that they're at target, and they're at their 2% target where the Fed likes to be. That allows them to come down on those short-term rates, the federal fund rates. And I want to explain to everybody. I know everybody still thinks everything is so expensive. It's so expensive for me to go to the grocery store. And I've explained this in all of my meetings and presentations that I've done. It is very important to understand that inflation, when it gets back down to 2%, it doesn't mean that prices are coming back down to where they were prior to inflation going up. What that means is, and I like to use the margarita as an example. It was $13 for a margarita. Now it's $15 for a margarita. It's not going to go back down to 13. It's not even going to go down to 14. It remains at 15. And if it's very low inflation, it stays at right around 15. Now, what we don't want to see happen is it go from 15 to 17 or 18. That's where you have inflation again. But when it goes from 15 to 15, that's no inflation. So if you want all goods prices to come down, the only way that is going to happen is if nobody has demand for anything. They don't go to restaurants, they don't buy anything, and if we don't buy anything, demand will deteriorate, and then all prices will come down. But also, when demand deteriorates like that, you have mass unemployment. You have people being fired, people being laid off. That's the way that's the way it would work. It would be a big, giant economic disaster, worse than the Great Recession. So, and what I'm describing, prices coming down, is called deflation. That's not what we're rooting for. We're rooting for inflation to get under control, which it is at this point. There are a few outliers that are still like continuing to escalate, and those are insurance. And no matter what the Fed does, it's just insurance is going to go up because the cost to replace homes, or cost to replace cars and things like that has gone up, and those have a lag effect, and those are why we've seen a little wonkier inflation, especially this year. So, but inflation continued to be, it's definitely continuing to moderate, and it is coming into where it needs to be. So I hope you liked this housing debrief. If you did like what you heard and you would like to subscribe to our channel, subscribe, hit like, please do that so that more people can then have eyeballs in front of this kind of content. And the most recent report that all markets got is called Top 3 Trends. We're seeing that in each of the markets. We do all of SoCal, including the Bay Area, Maricopa, Phoenix, and Clark County, Vegas. So, and if you'd like to go to reportsonhousing.com and utilize the coupon code ELECTION for a free month. So thank you again for joining us. I appreciate it. Joining us for another housing debrief. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and we will see you on the other side.